It can take quite a bit of convincing for an accomplished academic to leave a long-standing, tenured teaching position. In the case of Dr. Sekou Franklin, it seemed like the proverbial offer he couldn't refuse: to lead the John Lewis Center for Social Justice at Fisk University. When you've dedicated your study and professional practice to civil rights, it doesn't get much better. And believe it or not, the new job was right down the street from home. So are today's students ready and equipped to become the kind of justice warrior John Lewis was?
Not everyone is going to be out there in the streets protesting, organizing, but they can do other things. They can do lobbying, they can do mutual aid, they can do community dinners, they can do court watch, they can do a lot of different things that fall within the framework of building this beloved community that John Lewis talked about. And we have to be creative in giving people various roles to play in that regard.
I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner and Company. Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We both have unusual first names, but
yes,
your name literally means wise. That's either a lot of pressure or a great predictor.
Well, maybe it's to be determined. I wouldn't say it's pressure or a predictor, but I would say it's to be determined. Still an evolution.
Did you catch any heat, or were young kids understanding?
No, many people have had trouble pronouncing my name, but older folks often knew my name because there was an African president. His name, he went by Sekou because he had a basic accent in there, or hyphen in there. So, but over time, my friends gave me a nickname. It's the first time I ever mentioned it in Nashville. My friends back home call me Koo. and
you still answer to it?
Yes, I do. My friends call me that. All my friends, they never say. All my friends from college and so, but even high school, they never say Sekou. They call it. They say hey Koo. Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in California, Northern California, Bay Area, South Bay, and I grew up in San Jose, California, and as I got older, I lived in multiple cities in the Bay Area, so I was influenced by, I guess, multiple Bay Area identities, from the South Bay to the East Bay to San Francisco, and I did almost everything you can imagine in my late undergraduate and graduate school years, from coaching track to substitute teaching in 2 cities in the Bay Area. And so along with that, I was able to learn from different networks, different folks, different cultures. And so it was a great experience that really helped shape my orientation today.
Was there an event or a point in your youth that set you on this course of civil rights and social change and studying those movements?
Well, I used to say no, there wasn't. I used to say that really was just something that came to me. But in the last year or two, I think I would probably say maybe. And that was in junior high school, I was part of an organization, incidentally or accidentally, that was set up at my junior high school that did community outreach, community work. And for whatever reason, that was etched in my memory. And years later, when I got in college, I participated in numerous activities, and I was able to participate for the greater part of 4 summers in summer freedom schools that were part of an initiative that was launched by the Children's Defense Fund in partnership with the Black Community Crusade for Children and Black Student Leadership Network. And that training, that project over the course of basically 4 summers or 4 years, provided training in organizing, movement history, training in service advocacy, and gave me real on-the-ground experience of how to interact and organize in communities, and also allowed me to engage in teaching in freedom schools during that period of time. And so those collective experiences, I think, helped to shape my orientation today.
So a West Coast guy, how do you get to the American South? And was it a destination, or was that an accident as well?
It's probably an accident. I came out of undergraduate school and went to graduate school in California, and ultimately went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. And most of my graduate school experiences were at night. Most of my classes were at night. So during the daytime, I was able to do a variety of different things in terms of like community work, regular work, paying the bills, all that kind of stuff like that. The irony about Tennessee is that, as I mentioned earlier, is that as I worked with the Children's Defense Fund's Freedom Schools, I actually traveled to Tennessee as a young person to get training at what was called the Alex Haley Farm. And you're probably familiar with this, but the Haley Farm is named after, or was Alex Haley's former property. He sold it to the Children's Defense Fund, and the Children's Defense Fund turned it into a movement center, a training ground for young people. So I was actually coming to Tennessee as a young person, getting trained in freedom schools, getting trained in teaching pedagogy before I even thought about coming to Tennessee. So I ended up coming to Tennessee just simply because I was offered a job. And it just so happens also that my wife was from Tennessee. She's from Chattanooga. And so when I got offered the job, an idea that she was from Chattanooga, and I also had family that was in other parts of the South. That's how I ended up in Tennessee. But the route to Tennessee basically came from the Bay Area to D.C. to postgraduate work in Illinois, to Williams College for a year, and then to Nashville.
But you ended up at MTSU for quite a long time.
Yes, I got to MTSU in 2003, and it was, I didn't know if I expected to stay at MTSU for that long. I know what I wanted to do was settle down, because I had been traveling from one place to the other, and you know, when you're teaching as a professor, you remember the early years, but everything afterwards you don't remember. So what happened really after like 2011 and 12, I don't really even remember, because things just go by so fast once you get past your first stage of work in the job. And I really, as I got deeper into the being a professor, my values shifted. You know, because when you're young as a professor, you know, your goal is to get tenure, your goal is to do research. And as I got older, my values were about research and tenure is cool, but it's also about family considerations. You know, do my kids have access to in-laws? And so my mother's in Florida, my in-laws are in Chattanooga. Is there stability? Do I have a network of folks in the state of Tennessee? Because I was working with a lot of activist groups, then that was also important to me to maintain those networks. So as I kind of traveled through MTSU, my values were less focused on the publish or perish mantra that you hear about in the academy, or less focused on the ambition of going from one place to the other, and more so focused on the stability that could keep my family and my community whole.
But ultimately, you were lured away to Fisk University.
Yes.
To I would think, a lifetime opportunity.
Yes, and I was lured away to be the executive director of the John Lewis Center at Fisk University. Now, being at MTSU for that long, you know, I'm also a bleeding heart, so I felt guilty about leaving MTSU. And but I asked my friends and colleagues, including in my department, and everyone said, "Take it, go." And I said, "Really?" They said, "Yes." And so, but coming to Fisk University, it's an entirely different university. MTSU's 20,000+ people. Fisk is 1,000 to 1,100 folks. MTSU is has a large commuter population versus Fisk University. Fisk University is a longstanding HBCU or historically black college university, and it just so happens that I lived for 20 years or so closer to Fisk University than I did at MTSU. But also, it allowed me to take a lot of what I did in the community and to synthesize it into what is the John Lewis Center at Fisk University, of which I'm the executive director. So yes, it was a life-changing opportunity, and I'm enjoying it thus far.
Did you ever meet John Lewis?
I never met John Lewis. You know, it's one of the interesting things, and it was a little bit of backdoor tension in Nashville, is that a lot of activists on the ground, those people that are, fighting in the streets, those folks that are working on everything from police reform, criminal justice reform, voting rights, those folks that are protesting, all those folks, a lot of those activists in the streets actually had a hard time getting closer to John Lewis. So when he came to town and spoke, it was often maybe more established folks, people that had personal communications and networks, but a lot of folks that did not get a chance to meet John Lewis were the people actually who were carrying out John Lewis's legacy in the streets and in the community. And so there was some subtle tension around that, and that was not resolved. That has not been resolved to this day. So for me, what I try to do is whenever we have people who have name recognition or prominence, I try to make sure that people who have less visibility or who are not recognized, that they have proximity to those people.
The soldiers meet the generals.
The soldiers meet the generals. And what happened ultimately was, I remember vividly when John Lewis came to town, I actually was at a venue not too far from me. I was actually in the same building as he was, and I didn't even know he was there. So it was just the soldiers on the ground that were doing the work, community work, and really taking big, huge risks to make Nashville a more just society. In a lot of cases, they didn't even have a chance to have proximity to John Lewis. And it was not John Lewis's choosing. It was just the way that cities operate.
The center itself has existed for some years, a couple of years, but it hasn't drawn much notice until now. Why?
Yeah, the center was announced in 2020, and then they brought in the executive director. The Fisk University brought in the executive, an announcement meaning that they were able to raise the funds to establish the center. And it took them, I think, about a year or so to renovate the building. And they brought in the executive director, who is an outstanding superstar academic, but the executive director was only there for about a year. And then they created a fellows program for which they brought in effectively what we may call visiting faculty. But in terms of my role, I'm the first, I would call it, say, permanent long-term executive director. Again, someone was here for a year between 2021 and 2022, but left. I can't really answer why, but all I can say is that we're here now, and we're trying to build a lot of momentum in the community, and we'll see where it goes.
Is the center only for Fisk students and those associated with Fisk? Can the community? How does it work?
Yes, the center can work. The center can work how we tell it to work. Honestly,
good. You've got that freedom to sort of establish.
Yes, we 100%. My argument is we want to satisfy three principles. First principle is we want to always focus on developing the leadership capacity of students. That's not just an academic principle. That is a truism that comes out of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Ella Baker, John Lewis, that regardless of what conditions we face, if we can focus on developing the leadership capacity of students, we are headed in the right direction. So in that respect, we open up the center to student organizations to have meetings there. We try to be good allies to students. We try to give students leadership positions when it comes to activities. So that's number one. Number two is we want to be what I would call good citizens. I'm using the word citizen in terms of a campus. We want to be good citizens on campus. And that means that we want to be good citizens and allies to people on campus, faculty and staff who need assistance, in any way, shape, or that we can. Because Fisk University is small, and what I learned about Fisk is that it's small and it's a community that's tight knit, and it's one that relies upon communal bonds. But number three, the important thing is that we want to be good allies to policy activists, movements on the ground, and that means that we open up the center to partnerships in the community, to host meetings in the community. My only caveat is that the center will not be a place that promotes hyperpolarization. And sometimes with community work and movement work, I've been at this a long time, then these exercises can be polarized, and that's a non-starter in the community in my way. We don't want the community to be a place where there's the center to be a place where there's that. So related to that last part, since I've been at the center, we've had a community dinner in the neighboring housing development, Andrew Jackson Courts. We had that in November. We had a legislative advocacy training with the Tennessee State NAACP, and we also had that training with elite staffer from Capitol Hill. We just recently hosted a summit with the Southern Movement Committee. It was a regional summit that brought in about 150 people from across the South that focused on co-governing and democracy. And we're just really trying to be allies to folks in the community, but we're not trying to impose an ideological or political framework on that allyship. We're trying to be much more of a supportive network for them.
It's Banner and Company, and we'll be right back.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
History has shown us that effective activism does require solid training.
Yes.
And we know for a fact so much of that was born here in Nashville with Reverend Lawson and Kelly Miller Smith and others that were training these young students how to be effective. And those students, of course, became the leaders that we all know. Are students as receptive to being trained in tactics, or these days with instant communication and all the things at their disposal, or do those old ideas still hold?
No, they still hold, but the second part of that analysis with Lawson and Ella Baker and Kelly Miller Smith is how do we create opportunities for them to be trained, and that's what I think Ella Baker did for John Lewis with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so that's what we want to do. So we had, so students are receptive, but they need opportunities for that. So as an example, 2 weeks ago, we hosted an environmental justice webinar that we hosted simply because it was proposed to us by a student organization, the Rotaract Club, the Rotary Club, but they call it the Rotaract Club. So we are in partnership with Black Girl Vote, not because we are imposing ourselves to them, but they're coming to us to ask us for assistance and resources. We are having a nonviolent training in June with students from HBCUs. Our hope is to even bring in maybe 3 to 5 students from tribal colleges to give them training around nonviolent strategic action. So, yes, students are receptive to that, but they have to have opportunities that have to be created for them. And now again, those opportunities may look a little different than in years past because we have to be receptive to the language that students use today. We have to be receptive to the social media communications systems that they use today. And we're looking broadly at other factors. As an example, when it comes to the voter mobilization, for example, some activist groups are looking at gaming, like games, how gaming can be used as a way to bring people into a voter mobilization space. So we're trying to look at new and innovative ways, but the underlying principles that you mentioned earlier about Kelly Miller Smith and James Lawson, yes, students are receptive to that, but we have to be innovative in creating opportunities for them to get training.
You mentioned that the center will have a freestanding new building of its own.
Yes, we are scheduled to open up a new building in 2 years, and we hope that construction will start before the end of this year, and it will be called the John Lewis Center Annex, and it will have an auditorium, it will have, I think, a community room, several classrooms, and an exhibit space as folks walk in. And we wanted, again, to be not just available for students, we want it to be available for faculty, but we also want it to be available for community members as well.
Yeah. John Lewis actually was an American Baptist student prior to going to Fisk, but he does hold a Fisk degree.
Yes, he graduated from Fisk University, and so the Fisk folks and the American Baptist College folks, in a good way,
They both claim it.
They both claim him. But yes, he did. His arrival to Nashville came because he was a student at American Baptist College, and he attended ABC, American Baptist College, at a critical time in the late 1950s. And he attended ABC when they had just a cohort of activists who were not just instrumental, but played monumental roles in the movement. C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette, John Lewis, of course, James Bevel, and others. And then they united, of course, or came together with the Fisk folks and the Tennessee State University folks, and with Kelly Miller Smith as well, and produced the Nashville movement. But Fisk and American Baptist College folks both claim John Lewis, as they should.
Yeah. Most Americans have heard, the phrase "good trouble" or "necessary trouble" that was espoused by John Lewis and others. But it seems that acts of good trouble these days are being labeled domestic terrorism. Has the current climate put a chill on some of the values and some of the tactics that you would teach to students? Are people scared of good trouble?
Well, I would say that in some cases they are. I would say, talking to some of my colleagues from around the country, I'm in political science, that students are concerned that they could be, I guess in the olden days they would call it red baited, but nowadays they would call it targeted, that it could affect their job prospects. So there is that fear. But at the same time, you're seeing a groundswell of people supporting particularly nonviolent activism. And I'm part of a collection of folks who meet regularly about nonviolent activism, and they're in various networks across the country. And so we're seeing that there's a gravitational pull towards that. There's probably, although I can't point to any studies, but there's probably some racial differences going on too as well, where maybe I know some African Americans feel that they were the canaries in the mine. They warned the country what was to come, and they were not listened to. So they're wary about putting their bodies on the line to rescue democracy when they were the canaries in the mine and warning about the dangers to democracy. So there is that concern. So it's a mixed bag. And with all that said, our role at the John Lewis Center is to find various ways in which people can play a role in this march towards social justice in a beloved community. And that means that not everyone is going to be out there in the streets protesting, organizing, but they can do other things. They can do lobbying, they can do mutual aid, They can do community dinners. They can do court watch. They can do a lot of different things that fall within the framework of building this beloved community that John Lewis talked about. And we have to be creative in giving people various roles to play in that regard.
Here in Nashville, or a couple blocks away on our own Capitol Hill, where do you see the most fertile ground for citizen involvement, effective citizen involvement?
The most fertile ground. Well, I would say in Nashville in particular, we see fertile ground around immigration, particularly community defense, and the coalitions emerging to protect communities that are being targeted by ICE and other places. We see a good amount of success, I believe, in this effort to do what's called co-governance. Co-governance is this idea that community groups can come together, push for policy interventions and legislation, and also, at least on the front end, help to shape how that policy is implemented. And we saw that, I think, with the passage of the referendum that established the Community Oversight Board. But we also saw that recently with the work that the Southern Movement Committee did to get the mayor's Office of Youth Safety and helping to build that process up. So we're seeing that process as particularly important. I think that there are many community-based community development initiatives that are in Nashville that are looking at how to protect legacy communities like North Nashville, for example, that are important. I think that there's an opportunity in Nashville that has not become fully realized, but there is an opportunity there to find some way to advance an equitable growth agenda, an equitable development agenda. That this idea that the city of Nashville is growing so fast, but there's an affordability crisis, there's a transportation crisis, and I think that equitable development agenda has the ability to bridge various communities, some of whom are ideologically in disagreement with each other. But I don't think that the elected officials in Nashville fully understand that there's a possibility there. And I think overall, my hope is that in the state of Tennessee, but also the South, that there's going to be a groundswell of movements looking at state preemption, an idea that the state legislatures are using preemption or the ability to overturn and undermine localities in a way that's become particularly abusive. And I think there could be a possibility that could be an avenue where we can also build alliances between urban and rural communities.
We've also, at the Banner, reported on the faith community coming up with their own, if government's not going to provide affordable housing, that the faith community could perhaps pull together a fund that would build affordable housing in places like North Nashville. Would congregations and those sort of folks be welcome at the John Lewis Center to get training and get advice?
Yes, 100%. We are opening ourselves up to community folks. Now, again, we want to make sure that we are respective of various faith traditions. That's our only caveat. But 100% that we're open to the faith communities. And myself, I've worked with quite a few faith-based leaders over the last 20 years, so absolutely.
You mentioned the Community Oversight Board, which has had its difficulties in subsequent years after the people voted it in. It was gutted, and some would argue in some ways, subpoena power and other things taken away. How do you prevent folks from getting disappointed and discouraged? Hey, we tried it, we were there once, and it was all taken away.
Yeah, that's been the biggest challenge because the level of apathy and disillusionment can heighten easily and quickly. And so, I'm going to answer that question, but I want to say this is some of the challenges that we've seen with young people over the last 7 or 8 years, is that
the why bother thing?
Yeah, young people get out there in a protest for 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and then the change doesn't happen. So they say, well, I was out there protesting and change doesn't happen. And so, but that's not really how change happens. Change requires resilience. It requires one's ability to deal with setbacks and to recover from that. And so what we try to focus on, number one, I think, is we always want to focus on developing the leadership capacity of people, because even if we lose a political or policy fight, if we can win in that regard, that win, that victory, has a chance for a long-term success, because that person has ability and resilience to bounce back, to develop other leaders, and those kinds of things. Sometimes I'm not sure if you can prevent apathy and disillusionment. You just have to almost be a therapeutic interventionist when it comes to movement activism and policy activism, and find ways to move beyond that. But I think regarding the oversight board fight, we talked earlier, I was instrumentally involved in that effort for 2 or 3 years and spent hundreds of hours of work on that. And when the legislature, at least a committee in the state Senate, approved of the bill, and it was headed towards passage, it was such a harsh reality. I went home and it was just like a zombie. I mean, honestly, I was like a zombie. I felt crushed and bad, and I didn't really know what to do. But we rely upon these people, these histories. We rely upon John Lewis. I remember what Siegenthaler said about John Lewis, and said one day John Lewis was downtown Nashville in the early 1960s with a sign pushing for voting rights, and he's by himself. And Siegenthaler drove by him and said, well, they're going to win this fight because he has something that other people don't have, which is resilience. So we rely upon these movement leaders. We rely upon this history. We rely upon these legacies as a way to recover from setbacks and to chart new pathways forward. And that's what we did with the Oversight Board campaign, is that we experienced a defeat with the state preemption, and then we came back and found another alternative to at least bring some accountability. And that's what we try to do with folks when it comes to experiencing these setbacks. But we never want to give in to defeatism. With me, that is a hard line that I take. We can validate people's trauma. We can validate people's anger. We don't want to even dismiss it. We want to validate it, but we don't want to validate defeatism. We always want to find a way to say that we can chart a pathway forward if we just rely upon our own creative and human potential. And that's what we try to emphasize when it comes to the work that we're doing.
It's Banner and Company. And my guest is the new director of the John Lewis Center for Social Justice at Fisk University, Dr. Sekou Franklin. We'll be right back. When you aren't examining these big picture notions, when you have to rest your brain, what do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, I hang out with my kids. I hang out with my dog. I've tried to exercise more. I'm a big audiobook person.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I go to my audiobooks. I do things that everybody else does, but I may be a bit boring, so I can't really say I do any more than that. So,
do you expect that we will have future leaders emerge from their association with the John Lewis Center? Is that one of the goals, or would that be an accidental but welcome result?
Well, the best way I can answer that question is yes, but. So we have a program with the John Lewis, with the partnership with the Brennan Center, It's called the Partnership for Southern Impact. And we have scholarship students who are working on policy impact reports right now, focusing on rural healthcare options, given the closure of hospitals, focusing on food deserts. And so out of that space will come future leaders. The but part is that the students that we are working with are also being mentored and developed by other faculty at Fisk University.
Oh, so you're competing.
No, not competing. The best way to describe it is future leaders will come out of Fisk. The John Lewis Center is one part of that.
Gotcha.
And the John Lewis Center, if we weren't around, Fisk has such an outstanding group of talented students that future leaders will come out of Fisk anyway. We're just adding to it. And I want to emphasize this point. We are adding to it. We're putting icing on the cake of what Fisk already has to offer. And what Fisk has to offer, and particularly with the capacity of students there, the students are off the charts smarts. The students are off the charts outstanding. What they have to offer is really a gold mine of young people who are extraordinarily talented. So we're just offering, we're just adding to it. And future leaders will be coming out of Fisk. And you mentioned earlier about the larger climate, the larger political climate. It's very hard to put these young people down. It's very hard to beat these young people. It's very hard. If you have the belief that in this country that, as some people do, that we're gonna chip away at diversity, we're gonna chip away at rights, we're gonna chip away at workers, we're gonna do all these things that you see in today's political climate from certain parts of the community, and that folks are just gonna automatically say, okay, we're gonna take it, or they're not gonna find other ways to move forward, they're wrong, because the students are so talented, and at least at Fisk University, and they're being mentored by a significant group of people, a diverse group of folks at Fisk, and we're just adding to it.
Do you see a pendulum swinging?
Yes, I'm an idealist. So yes, it could swing, but it can also swing back the other way again. And so democracy is not a linear process. And that's what we learned in my training in political science coming out of my graduate work. It's not linear. It's not always sequential. It goes up and down, backwards and forwards. And groups, young people, community groups, have to always be resilient, have to always be on the job and pushing for an expansion of democracy, expanding the boundaries of the political community. So yes, it can swing towards a direction of democracy, but it also could swing the other way as well.
And you've got to understand it's a long haul game.
It's a long haul game, and that's the point that I think young people have to learn that. That look, I mean, we're talking about. I'm the first. My age is the first generation of folks. I'm not saying me, but my age is the first generation of folks that lived in a post Jim Crow society. Like, could you imagine that? Could you imagine that black folks from Danville, Virginia, and black folks from Kaufman County, Texas, they could not use a library? Could you imagine that? I'm going through a research project right now. I'm doing a research project right now.
What's
Could you
one
imagine
thing
that?
you would do
and all
if
the
you had total
affidavits that
freedom
civil
to
rights
do that
activists
one
gave
thing?
while they're working in the Mississippi Delta in the 1960s, that when they were attacked by the Klan and white supremacist groups, those groups are also working with the local sheriff departments. That means that the bombings, the killings, the torture, all this stuff that happened against civil rights workers was done hand in glove with law enforcement. Could you imagine that all that happened? So I'm the first generation, my age, to live in a society that's post-Jim Crow. I'm the first generation to live in a society in which Native Americans could fully get their voting rights. I'm the first generation of folks in society in which language minorities were able to have protections in the voting booth vis-a-vis the 1975 reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. So yes, progress can be a linear process, but could also go backwards. And we always have to keep our eyes on the prize and keep struggling to expand the boundaries of democracy, and also to reflect internally about our own shortcomings, and making sure that we are open to being challenged about our own shortcomings as activists and as academicians.
Our thanks to Dr. Franklin. And we should mention that Dr. Franklin's wife, Tanae Franklin, is a member of our Nashville Banner Board. Banner & Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode is produced by Steve Haruch and edited by me. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. Our final question is in the fishbowl there.
Oh. Wow.
You never know what you might get.
Never know what to get because I'm nearsighted. Let me see. Oh, yes. From Lana Matthews Jr.
What is one thing that you believe in that might be unpopular opinion?
Ooh. Huh. I think there's more common ground between, I'll use race here, between, as an example, African Americans in North Nashville, an unhoused community, working across the city, about growth and development and the need to bring equity to growth and development. There's more common ground between them and working class whites who might be conservative, who might even be MAGA, but who may live in other parts of town, Jolton, Goodlettsville, Whites Creek, around this issue of equitable growth. And there's more common ground on that issue between those camps that may be ideologically opposed to each other on many issues. There may be even a partisan divide, but on the issue of equitable growth, an idea of affordability, an idea of making sure they're not priced out of their communities, I think there's more common ground around that than many of the state and city leaders believe there is.